All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out today. As you can see, we have a combination of both our local government in terms of police departments, federal entities, etc. And I'm going to introduce some of our membership here today. This press conference is generated behind an operation we've been conducting and come to somewhat of a conclusion. Starting back in October 26, we responded to a large volume of shootings and increased calls that we've seen for services when it came to several of our districts, in particular Pompano Beach, Deerfield, as well as unincorporated Broward County. This was a concern for the community. They made that clear through emails and other different correspondence, and it was most certainly a concern of mine and all the men and women you see behind me. And so we put forth an Operation Green Shield, which ended on November 16th, and that operation was generated to focus on apprehending and bringing in some of our more violent offenders in this community. And that led us to creating operations targeting gang members, and we had a tremendous amount of success that this community should be proud of. When I talk about the nature of success, what do I mean? What does that look like for us? What did that look like in terms of this operation? This operation yielded 54 arrests related to felonies. It also yielded the secure and removal of over 34 firearms in this community. Some of those firearms included high-powered rifles, semi-automatic rifles, in addition to submachine guns and handguns capable of penetrating through body armor. In addition, we were able to secure over 2 kilograms of heroin, 211 grams of cocaine, and 116 grams of fentanyl. In addition, by pursuing these gang members and these violent offenders, we were able to take off the streets another $359,000 of illicit monies that we know at some point we'll be able to return back into this community through actions such as the law enforcement trust funds and many other endeavors that we're going to use these monies for. This would not be possible, most certainly would not be possible, without highlighting and talking about the different groups and units that you see behind me that made this happen. That's to include the Strategic Investigation Divisions here at BSO, our Criminal Investigations Division, our SWAT team members, Viper, our crime suppression teams in both Deerfield, Pompano Beach, as well as unincorporated Broward County. And of course, we'd like to say thank you to all our federal entities who took the time out to join this operation. And it has been a cross-section of federal entities to include the Homeland Security Investigations, our Drug Enforcement Administration, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, our U.S. Marshals Services, our local entities to include the Lauderhill Police Department, Boca Raton, as well as the Florida Probation and Parole. As you can see, there was a lot of moving parts that took place over the last few days, and there's been a lot of success, but I will tell you, we are not done. We were able to look at the success we had with this operation, and if we can do this in a 30-day period, if we can do this under a joint effort making this community safer, then we'll continue to put forth operations to help take some of the most violent offenders off the street. What I'd like to do now is take a moment and allow Lieutenant Tianga to come up and highlight 3 of these cases that had a great impact in this community in this operation.
We had a great operations going with some really bad guys out there, one of which I'm going to highlight is Jermaine Garland. He was an individual with an extensive criminal history, documented gang member. Actually, back in October, deputies arrived on scene in Deerfield due to an allegation that assault AK-47s were being taken out of vehicles. They responded. Jermaine started throwing rocks at them, threatened to shoot them. Within days, there was a couple shootings in Deerfield that involved FN rounds. If you guys don't know about FN rounds, they're actually called the cop killers because they're said to penetrate our bulletproof vests. So we actually introduced an undercover. Mr. Garland agreed to sell heroin to him. When we took him into custody, he was actually in possession of an FN firearm, which was loaded. He also was in possession of 36.4 grams of heroin, 1.9 grams of cocaine, and 6.7 grams of oxycodone. And if I didn't say this, the FN was actually loaded with 20 rounds of FN ammo. Also, a search warrant was conducted at his residence where we seized over $345,000 in cash, 1.2 kilograms of heroin, and an AR-15 rifle with ammunition, and approximately $100,000 worth of jewelry. This investigation is actually ongoing. I want to talk to you about another case took place in Pompano. Another gang member named Breon Kinder, who had an extensive criminal history. He was actually reported to be selling trafficking amounts of narcotics out of his grandmother's house, which probably seemed safer to him to send the rival drug dealers and SWAT teams there. We actually were able to introduce an undercover where he purchased crack cocaine and heroin on 6 different occasions. We eventually executed a search warrant at the residence where we found 71 grams of crack cocaine, 22 grams of heroin, and a 9mm Tech 9 assault-style pistol with a magazine containing 22 rounds of ammunition. We also conducted another investigation here in Central Broward involving a longtime criminal, extensive criminal history with, I believe it was 10 felony convictions already. He was a gang associate. We had information that he was selling narcotics. He sold to an undercover probably, I believe it was 4 times. When we executed the search warrant at his residence, we found trafficking amounts of cocaine and heroin, over $13,000 worth of jewelry, as well as a 9mm Glock style, drum style magazine with over 41 rounds of ammunition inside. So as you can see, these guys are out there committing crime, selling drugs, committing violence, and they have access to handguns. So this is what we really focused on in this operation, was targeting the violence. And I appreciate you guys for being here. I mean, we got to let the justice system run its part, and then we got to do our part, which is keeping people safe. We're going to keep tackling the issues as they come to us, and ultimately we're devoted to the community, so we just keep going forward with that. We typically will statistically deploy resources. So given that there's a statistical reason we're seeing an increase in crime, or we're seeing a crime trend, that would be how we would decide to deploy the resources. Yeah, that's actually a great question. So a lot of it came from information we got from the community. So unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to come forward. You know, they fear retaliation too, so they'll come to us on the side and say, hey, listen, especially even with like the shootings up in Deerfield, people were coming and saying, you didn't hear it from me, but Garland and his associates are responsible for those shootings that happened. And so he became a focus in the investigation. We had already known him to have an extensive criminal history, but that was where our focus really came into play. Absolutely. We actually saw an uptick in violent crime and shootings that were occurring, and you know, our road patrol and our crime suppression teams do an amazing job keeping their communities safe. But this became better to make it a collaborative effort and really get all the resources that we needed in order to bring that crime down, according to the information. I mean, sometimes, you know, these are ongoing investigations, so I don't want to get too much into the actual shootings, but what I can tell you from the people who have already been arrested, this was a lot that came from community support.
One of the things we saw at the very early onset with the COVID-19 crisis occurring here in the county, and how that impact with the large party gatherings over across in unincorporated Broward County, we start seeing these spikes in these parties, and then the association to shootings were occurring subsequent to the parties. So after the party would end, there'd be a gathering, there'd be a fight, there'll be disturbance, there'll be shots fired. And then that sparked us to do a couple things. First, we invested into ShotSpotter for the first time in unincorporated Broward County to get that system up and running to help us reduce the response time to calls for services for those type of events. The second aspect, in terms of what has this operation done in terms of reduction in crime, we've already seen as a byproduct of this operation a 35% decrease in shooting calls in these areas. So I think that's significant to talk about the type of work and activities that these men and women have committed to, and how it's already having an impact not only on taking people off the street, not only on removing firearms and weapons that can hurt us but civilians, but also to provide us statistics and say, yeah, we have a benchmark now on a set. If we know we can drop this down to 35%, then we most certainly should have more ambitions to continue to do that throughout the year.